This isn't the story of a superhero, it's the story of an ordinary man, someone who once held nothing more dangerous than chalk and a duster. But time, cruel and unforgiving, turned that same man into one of the deadliest snipers the world had ever seen. A hunter who could deliver death with precision, even blindfolded. It all began in a quiet corner of Ukraine, in a small, modest home. Mika lived there with his wife Nastya, a life where noise was rare and peace was everything. Nastya was an artist. She could take lifeless pieces of wood and carve them into something that felt alive. And Mikolo, he was a simple school teacher, a man who found comfort in numbers and equations. He hated violence. To him, the biggest battle wasn't on a battlefield. It was inside his own classroom. A constant struggle with a troubled student named Evan. Evan, the spoiled son of a wealthy man, tried every day to provoke him. He mocked Mikola's clothes, his poverty, his quiet nature, hoping to push him over the edge, just enough to make him lose control, raise his hand, and lose his job. But Mikola stayed calm, cold as ice. None of it got to him. Their life was simple. No TV, no radio. Cut off from the chaos of the outside world, they were happy in their own little universe. And then, one day, everything changed. The news came, and it lit up Mikola's world. He was going to be a father. That evening, their happiness was indescribable. For them, it felt like a festival, like life had finally rewarded them. They had no idea it would be their last peaceful night. The next morning, as Mikola rode his bicycle to school, he noticed something strange. Armed men in unfamiliar uniforms. They weren't Ukrainian. A strange unease crept into his chest, but he brushed it off as nothing. Until he reached the school, it was silent. Not normal silence, something heavier, something that screamed. The building was completely empty. And then he learned the truth. Russia had invaded. Borders had collapsed, and the streets now belonged to death. The ground beneath him felt like it disappeared. Only one thought remained in his mind. Nastya. He turned his bicycle around and rode like a madman back home. But when he got there, everything had already changed. 2 Russian soldiers were tearing his house apart. Nastya. She was being used as a shield, beaten mercilessly. Mikola fell to his knees in front of them, begging, pleading. He told them she was pregnant, that they should let her go. But their hearts were stone. When they found nothing worth stealing, they set the house on fire. Their home, their memories, everything went up in flames. And something inside Nastya broke. She picked up a stone and threw it at them with all of her strength. And then, a single shot. Cold, ruthless, perfect. Her breath stopped right there. In that moment, Mikola's entire world turned to ash before his eyes. Hours later, when Ukrainian soldiers arrived, they found a haunting scene. Mikola sitting silently, holding his wife's lifeless body in his arms. He wasn't crying anymore. There were no tears left. Only one thing remained in his eyes. Revenge. The soldiers helped him bury Nastya. And beneath that pile of earth, he didn't just bury his wife and his unborn child. He buried who he used to be. The quiet, gentle teacher. The man who hated violence. Now, he had nothing left to live for, except one thing. Revenge. He begged the soldiers to take him with them. He didn't want to solve equations anymore. He wanted to calculate death. He wanted to find the finger that pulled that trigger. And that's where this story truly begins. The story of an ordinary man who slowly transforms into one of the most dangerous snipers in history. With his home reduced to ashes and his life shattered beyond repair, Mikola now moved toward the military base alongside those 2 soldiers. Before leaving, he reached into the wreckage and pulled out a small wooden figure. The same one Nastya had carved with her own hands for his protection. But now, he knew something had changed. What lay ahead wouldn't be guarded by prayers, but by gunpowder. When Mikola arrived at the base, the atmosphere felt nothing like his classroom. Where there had once been silence and discipline, here there was chaos, noise, urgency, tension in every direction. The moment the commander laid eyes on the thin, bespectacled schoolteacher, suspicion kicked in. Could he be a spy? In times like these, trusting a stranger wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. The commander had almost decided to send him away immediately. He looked into Mikola's eyes. There was something there, a hollow emptiness, and beneath it, something far more intense, a burning need for revenge. That fire made the commander hesitate. Mikola told him everything, how in a single moment he had lost his home, his wife, and his unborn child. There was pain in his voice, but even stronger than that was a cold, controlled rage. He said it plainly, I have nothing left to lose, only enemy blood left to take. That truth broke through even the commander's hardened exterior. And just like that, Mikola was allowed to train. But the real test was only beginning. The early days of training were nothing short of hell for him. The same hands that had spent years holding chalk and writing formulas now had to learn how to handle a heavy rifle. Other soldiers could assemble their weapons in seconds. Mikola, he was always the slowest. The others laughed at him, as if he had walked into the wrong world. One night, Mikola approached his senior and said, "Don't call me by my name, my code name will be Raven." That was enough to set the entire camp laughing. The senior smirked and replied, Code names aren't handed out for free, soldier. You earn them on the battlefield. Mikola didn't argue, but he took it personally. From that night on, while the barracks slept, he stayed awake, alone, in the dark. He ran his fingers over every part of the rifle, learning it by touch, assembling it, disassembling, repeating it again and again. Slowly, the thing that made him weakest was becoming his greatest strength. Then one day, the commander made an announcement. We need snipers, hunters who can eliminate the enemy from a distance. Without hesitation, Mikola raised his hand, and once again, laughter. The commander looked straight at him. You can barely assemble a rifle, and you want to be a sniper? Then he threw down a challenge. Fine, prove it. Assemble this rifle in 200 seconds. Mikola stepped forward. He picked up the rifle, and then he blindfolded himself. The entire ground fell silent. He wasn't seeing anymore. He was feeling every part, every connection. And just as the timer hit 18 seconds, the rifle was ready. For a moment, there was silence. Then, applause. The same people who once laughed at him were now staring in disbelief. In the commander's eyes, suspicion had been replaced by respect. Sniper training began. But even then, his path wasn't easy. He was deliberately given an old, worn-out rifle, while others trained with modern weapons. When he questioned it, the answer was simple. Want better gear? Prove you deserve it. Because being a sniper isn't just about accuracy, it's about patience. During training, seniors would fire shots near the trainees, create chaos, noise, pressure, just to break their focus. Anyone who flinched was out. But Mikola, he wasn't human anymore. He had turned into stone. Bullets passed close to him, dust rose around him. But he didn't even blink. His eyes stayed locked on the target. And then came the next test. Even more dangerous. The enemy would appear for just a single moment, and in that one moment, Milka would have to decide their fate. The training ground was no longer just a place for drills, it had turned into a real test. On one side stood soldiers equipped with modern high-end weapons, and on the other, Mikola, holding that same old worn-out rifle. This next test wasn't about strength, it was about the mind. A blackboard was placed in front of them, completely blocking the target. Now the game was about estimation, focus, and control. Mikola took a deep breath, steadied himself, and fired. But this time, it wasn't his skill that failed him. It was his weapon. A slight deviation just enough, and he was out of the round. Everyone knew the truth. The mistake wasn't his. But in the military, reasons don't matter. Only results do. And the real test was still ahead. Darkness swallowed the entire field, and suddenly, a flare shot into the sky, bursting into a blinding light. The rule was simple. The moment the light appears, you take the shot. As soon as the flare lit up the sky, the other soldiers fired instantly, without thinking. Every shot missed, and Mikola, he didn't move. He didn't even pull the trigger. Because he wasn't searching for the target in the light, he was calculating, measuring distance in his mind, reading the wind, building an invisible target using pure mathematics. And then, the light faded, darkness returned, and in that silence, one shot rang out. Clean, precise, dead center. For a few seconds, no one moved. The commander's eyes widened. Mikola had proven something undeniable. A true sniper doesn't hunt with his eyes, he hunts with his mind. And in that moment, he earned his name. Raven was ready. The colonel selected him for his first major mission. Intelligence reports confirmed Russian forces had taken over a checkpoint. Raven and his team moved into position silently. Everything was going according to plan. They were seconds away from pulling the trigger, when suddenly, a civilian vehicle pulled up. Russian soldiers dragged innocent people out, snatched their papers, and began beating them mercilessly. That was the line. The moment the colonel gave the order, silence shattered into gunfire. Within seconds, every enemy soldier at the checkpoint was down. It was Raven's first mission, a complete success. But the victory didn't last long. As soon as they returned to base, everything changed. Several of their men, sent on a different mission, never came back. They had been killed by one man, Russia's deadliest and most ruthless sniper, Siri. The air shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something else. A new hunger for revenge. The next mission was even more dangerous. Raven's team moved into a region where death hid beneath every step. They planted landmines across the area and waited. It didn't take long. A unit of Russian soldiers entered the zone. Raven looked through his scope, and for a moment the ground beneath him disappeared. Among them was Evan. The same Evan who once sat in his classroom now stood before him in enemy uniform. For a brief second, Raven's hand trembled. The heart of a teacher hesitated to pull the trigger on his own student. But then, he saw Nastia's face. The burning house, that final scream. He buried his emotions and shifted his aim, not at Evan, but at the landmines. The next second, a massive explosion tore through the ground. The earth shook, fire and dust filled the air. And Evan, along with his entire unit, was gone. Today, Raven didn't just eliminate the enemy. He erased the last piece of his past. Now only one question remained. Could he face Siri, the sniper who had slaughtered his comrades? Or was this war about to become the final clash between two hunters? The smoke from the explosion hadn't even fully cleared when the commander's anger became unmistakable. He looked straight at Mikola, and the weight of what had just happened, killing his own student, was written all over his face. In a deep, firm voice, the commander said, "Out here, there are no relationships, only enemies. Evan chose his path. Don't carry the burden of his fate on your heart." The words were harsh, but they were the truth. Back at base camp, the distance between Mikola and the commander slowly began to fade. One night, when silence wrapped around the camp, the commander pulled a photo from his pocket. In it were his two young daughters, innocent, smiling, completely unaware that their father lived each day under the shadow of death. At home, he had told them a lie, that he was just a businessman. Mikola listened quietly. Then, for the first time, he opened up his own wound. Nastia's death, his destroyed home, his shattered world. That night, they weren't just soldiers. They were two broken men, holding each other together. But war doesn't give anyone much time. The next mission was an ambush on a deserted road. Mikola and the commander took their positions, still, alert, holding their breath. Then two Russian soldiers appeared in the distance. The moment Mikola looked through his scope, his blood boiled. One of them was the man who had killed his wife. His hands began to tremble. His breathing turned heavy. He asked the commander for permission to fire, but the commander responded calmly, firmly, "Wait, we move with the team." This time, Mikola couldn't hold back. All he could see was Nastia's face. He ignored the order and pulled the trigger. The bullet hit perfectly. The soldier dropped instantly, but that one shot changed everything. Their position was exposed. The commander shouted, "What have you done?" But it was already too late. Somewhere in the darkness, another pair of eyes had been watching. Russia's deadliest sniper, Siri. Mikola's single mistake became an opportunity for him. And then, a shot tore through the silence. Clean, precise, straight through the commander's head. Everything ended in an instant, right before Mikola's eyes. His commander, his mentor, his friend, fell. Then chaos erupted. Bullets rained. Explosions followed. Mikola understood. This was his fault, but there was no time to regret. Through the burning battlefield, he lifted the commander's body onto his shoulder and somehow escaped that circle of death. Back at base, he couldn't forgive himself. His one act of defiance had taken a father away from his daughters. Now, only one purpose remained: to kill Siri. Soon after, intelligence came in. Two Russian snipers were hiding nearby. This time, Mikola wasn't just a hunter. He was a wounded predator. The mission began. He eliminated the first sniper without giving him a chance, but the second one fired back. The bullet tore through his arm. The pain was unbearable. But Milko was no longer the man who feared pain. He clenched his teeth, held his position, and with one precise shot, took the second sniper down. Blood was pouring, his body was weakening, but the fire in his eyes hadn't faded. Wounded, he made his way to a hidden shelter. He needed time to prepare, because now, the real battle was coming. On one side, Raven. On the other, Siri. And the only question left was, would Mikola overcome his injuries and the guilt of his commander's death? Or would this final clash between two hunters end one of their stories forever? Amid the darkness, the pain, and the exhaustion, a message from the major finally reached Mikola. It was big news. At last, they had a lead on the shadow, the one responsible for the colonel's death. The moment Mikola reached the base, the major didn't waste time. "The man you're looking for isn't just any soldier," he said. "He's Russia's deadliest sniper, Siri." A name that had become synonymous with fear. He had already taken down 6 of Ukraine's finest snipers, and he didn't just kill. He recorded their deaths, spreading terror through every video. But every hunter has a pattern, and sometimes that pattern becomes a weakness. Siri rarely changed his position. That was his greatest strength, and now it would be used against him. The strategy was set. This wasn't just another mission. This was a final confrontation. According to the plan, one team would launch a direct assault, creating noise, chaos, distraction. Another team would move in from behind, sealing off escape routes. And in the middle of that storm, Raven Mikola would slip in silently into the very building where death had made its home. The moment they reached the location, gunfire erupted into the sky. Smoke, screams, explosions, pure chaos. And within it, Mikola moved like a shadow and entered the building. 2 Russian guards crossed his path. They didn't even get the chance to react. Outside, his team intensified the attack as planned. Enemy soldiers began dropping one by one. Meanwhile, up in his position, Siri started to feel something was wrong. Silence on the radio. No responses. He rushed to the rooftop, only to find his sniper partner already dead. For the first time, fear crossed his face. He understood. Today, the hunter had become the hunted. He immediately called for backup. 10 minutes, came the reply. But he didn't have 10 minutes. He didn't even have 10 seconds. He turned quickly toward his rifle and froze. On the table lay a small wooden figure, the same one Nastia had carved for Mikola. This wasn't coincidence, it was a message. I'm here. Before Siri could fully process it, Mikola struck. No gunfire, no noise, just rage, pain, and burning revenge. A silent, brutal fight broke out between them, and in the end, Mikola killed him with his own hands. The man who had destroyed his world was gone. Nearby, another hidden sniper tried to intervene, but Mikola reacted instantly, taking him out with a perfectly placed grenade. Just then, Siri's radio crackled again. The backup team had arrived. Mikola picked it up, and in a cold, steady voice said, "You all came here to die." The next second, his rifle roared. The truck driver dropped instantly. As the remaining soldiers panicked and jumped out, they were met by Ukrainian snipers already in position. Within minutes, it was over. That day, it wasn't just gunfire echoing through the battlefield. It was justice. A few days later, Mikola stood in front of a quiet grave. This time, there was no anger in his eyes, only a strange sense of peace. He had avenged his wife and his colonel. He stood there in silence for a while, then made a quiet promise. As long as I breathe, I will defend my homeland. Once, he was just a simple math teacher, a man who taught children how to add and subtract. Now, he had become one of the deadliest snipers protecting his country. Mikola was no longer just a man. He had become an echo against injustice. If you liked this story, share it with your friends. What do you think? Was Mikola right to seek revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And stay tuned for more powerful stories like this. See you in the next one.